In a world of darkness, in the distance, your character spots a marching army of undead. They're ready to extinguish all life. The question is, does your character have the strength and the courage to defeat them, or will they fail as so many have before them? Hello, I'm Marcos, also known as the Enchanted Lore Master. Today we will begin a series of videos in which we will take a deep dive into the world of role-playing. Another acronym that goes by RP. So for today, we will begin by talking about the different types of RP, and the later part, we'll talk about some of the common terms. For the first type of RP, let's talk about TTRPG, also known as tabletop RPG. Doesn't look like I got a 20. That's quite unfortunate. So, common types of tabletop RPGs are known as the Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder RPG, Vampire the Masquerade, and many others. And this is the type of setting where you go and you will typically meet with friends. It could be online, which we will discuss later, or in person, in which you are able to roll dice and play a character by using that particular system. Now, another type of RP is known as LARP, or LARP, or live action RP. And this is the one where you see people dress up in these armor or other attire, and you might see them on occasion with certain organizations where they have battles in your local park. Well, there's an organization throughout the United States that people can participate in certain events. What we recently found out, though, is that there are locations in which they take the live action RP and you get to play a character and spend multiple days participating in quests and missions and battles. There's one location that is in Texas. There is bigger events in Europe in which you can get your training to become a witcher or even participate in a battle of orcs versus other elven or fantasy sort of creatures. So if this is more your style and you like to dress up and really feel like you're into it, then I would recommend going out there and looking at some other videos and maybe get a taste of it, So now for the other type of RP, and that is the type that you typically see online associated with video games, particularly MMOs. And you can see this with World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls Online. And in these, what you do is you create a character, and your character is a part of that world and that story. And you typically join an RP guild and follow their rules and their process for RPing, but usually your character fits the theme that is of the story. For example, in World of Warcraft, your character might be a paladin that's spent his life fighting demons. Or in Elder Scrolls, you might just be a humble mage looking to make a little bit of extra coin. So there is different communities there in which you can experience this. And we'll have a little bit more about that later on. But did you know that there is a plethora of genres that you can RP? The most common one is fantasy, and its different subcategories that is typically associated with Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. Now, if you desire to go into the stars or have heavy mechs and want to delve into more the sci-fi genre, you can through systems like BattleTech, Starfinder, or even Star Wars. Perhaps you like to have more spooky, psychological, or monstrous type of systems, and that can be found with Call of Cthulhu or Vampire the Masquerade. And maybe you prefer to play a system in which your character resides in a certain story element. For example, Game of Thrones, or Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars. Like I said, there is a wide variety of systems and ways that you can play an RP. As with different industries have their own vocabulary, such as if you're an IT professional, maybe you're in the financial industry, or whatever else. The same can be said about gamers and those who role play. Here are a few vocabulary that I think would be beneficial as a newer person to understand and help you get into this world. So when you hear some of these vocabulary terms, please keep in mind that some of them will vary slightly depending on the system that is being used. For example, D&D kind of has their own way versus maybe some of the others, but you will start to see that there are very similar aspects to them. So let's just take a look at some of these that you may come across. For example, GM and DM. So that is referred to as the Game Master or Dungeon Master. Obviously, Dungeon Master being more associated with Dungeons and Dragons. But the idea of this is a person who is responsible for organizing the game and presenting the story to the players, which are, and your characters, so the player characters. So that way you have someone who is running the game and you can enjoy, and is typically somebody with a little bit of experience who understands the rules of the system. So the player character, that is the character that you get to create and play, that gets to go along this adventure. Sometimes, depending if it is a one-shot or if it's a ongoing campaign, will vary on what type of PC that you get to create. Sometimes they give you one that is already pre-made and you could just get into it. Typically you see this with one-shot sort of things where they get to kind of test out systems, get your feet wet, and what have you. Now, this is a term that is kind of common out there too, NPC. Now, an NPC is non-playable character, and as you can guess, this is one that is typically controlled by the GM. And the benefit of this character is they serve many, many roles. They can be the antagonist to the PCs, they can be helpers, they can be vendors, and sometimes they're reoccurring, and different sorts. But it is another tool in the tool belt for the GM to help bring the game and the story to life so that way you can further enjoy it. Now for some kind of other terms that are valuable but just don't kind of fall into the typical categories that we described above. So these are kind of the ones that I want to bring to your attention because it depends on your role-playing journey. They could benefit you. For example, you might come across, especially in the MMORP space, where some individuals might be interested in ERP. I urge you some caution with that, because that stands for erotic role-playing. So that is its own separate thing, more for adults and stuff like that. But do know that there are some communities that are acceptable of that if you do it in a private setting and of willing participants. So Just keep that in mind. So if someone says, hey, you want an ERP, you know what they are referencing to. Now, another term is the idea of homebrew. This one is where the GM will present to you a story that is of his own making and imagination. So basically, this is not going to be like an official licensed story. So it is a story of their own making. And you can sometimes find where there are homebrew rules. So those are made up rules or whatever that kind of shift from the standard stuff. The GM should be presenting these things so that way you know what to expect. Another good term to have in your belt is IC versus OOC. IC. Is that ICUC? We all see? No. What I'm talking about here is in character versus out of character. And this is a good thing because we're going to talk about this is important to put that line and separate the two. Because in character is when you're immersed in talking about what your character would do versus you might have a conversation or make a statement that is out of character. For example, I might say, and Caden walks over and picks up the mug and slams it on the counter. Give me another round. That would be an example of being in character. Versus, hey John, did you see that gas prices has gone down today? That would be out of character. So I think that's a pretty good wrap of some of the terms that we can begin with for today, and there will be others that we can introduce you to as this series goes on. So I hope you found this beneficial. That's it for today, and thank you for watching.